Hello, welcome to our latest episode in Designing Customer Experiences. I'm Lisa Skinner, one of the managing partners at Engine Service Design. And today I'm going to be joined by Yasmin Ali, and we're going to be talking to you about the power of customer personas. So Yasmin's a customer intelligence manager at Majid Al-Futtaim. For those of you who don't know, Majid Al-Futtaim own and operate retail, property, leisure and entertainment establishments in the Middle East and North Africa. Yasmin's a market research professional with over 15 years experience, having worked in the UK and the Middle East. She's been client-side, agency-side and worked with huge brands spanning automotive, FMCG and the public sector, as well as leisure. The common thread in her experience is her desire to really understand customers, their attitudes, their needs, and really drive a deep level understanding of customers in order to drive meaningful change. So, if you're looking to get beyond generic understanding of your customers, to really look and understand customers at a deeper level, to define what matters most for them and how that varies across your customer base, and most importantly, how you use that understanding to really change the way your organisation thinks about your customers and the customer experiences that you deliver, then stay tuned. Hi Yasmin, great to see you. So, how are you doing?
I'm okay, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here. How are you, Lisa?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good. So, customer personas then. Right. So, for the purposes of our listeners, why don't we start by you sharing a little bit more about your role and what led you to start to think about customer personas?
Yeah, of course. So, I'm part of the CX team at Majid Al-Futtaim. In particular, I work within MAF Entertainment. So now what that means is that we're actually doing customer experience for large brands, well-known brands in the region, such as Vox Cinemas, indoor skiing, global snow brands, so like Snow Oman, Snow Abu Dhabi, and also family favourite Magic Planet. Now, in terms of my remit, it's specifically to do with customer intelligence. And it's quite broad, right? So I mentioned customer experience. Within that is customer intelligence. But what that actually means, in essence, is all about being customer-centric, finding out more about our customers, what their needs are, what their motivations are. So I guess that led us on to actually creating or having a need for customer personas. As you would know, in the customer experience space, there's like many strings to our bow, right? So like you would do primary research, you've got secondary research, you've got also your advanced analytics team. And I think putting that all together, you kind of then work out, okay, so I have this to my disposal, I have something else, but what's missing?
Right.
And I think when we did that, it's not like we didn't have personas, we did. But COVID happened. And I think that was a big kind of obviously curveball for the whole world, not just those in entertainment. But I think in particularly why it affected our industry is because obviously it's something where for you to enjoy, you need to sit next to someone and hopefully you sit next to someone you know. But with the restrictions during COVID, how there needs to be a distance, obviously it posed a challenge. Which meant by what that resulted in is a lot of closures for our cinemas for a period of time because of government regulations. And I think that then led to kind of people forming their own social life in the sense that they had to then make a decision of, I'm not allowed to go out, what do I do? And then I think as humans, you kind of form that habit, right? So what do they say? It takes 21 days to form a habit. And I think that kind of led on to that, where people started staying at home and creating your own evenings and mimicking like movie nights at home. And so it did take a bit of a hit in terms of going to the cinema, visitation and so on. what we discovered through our own research is that there was a change in behaviour with our guests. And obviously that led us to kind of want to understand them better as to what's preventing them from coming back to the cinemas, but also really getting down to their relationship with entertainment in the first place, and hopefully kind of helping to make them remember that and draw it out to get them back in.
So you had some personas already, right? You had you'd seen this change in behaviour, and you'd noticed that people weren't coming back in the way that you thought that they would, right? And you recognise that things had changed in the world. So if I'm hearing you correctly, then what you're saying is you were at a point where you needed to find ways to bring people back into the cinema, but also back into other leisure and entertainment offerings that you've got. Yeah. So, as you said, you've got a wealth of data and data points within your team and within Majid Al-Futtaim already. What was it then about personas that you thought were the thing that you really needed to focus on?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, I guess when you think about just our customers, I think the instant thing is to think about segmentation. Right. And so, you know, which is very valuable, and it's something that we actually always overlay with our personas and kind of connect them. So I think the instant reaction is to say, think about demographics, like, so this is Lisa, what's her age group? You know, how much does she spend? What's your frequency? Which is all very important stuff. But what I also want to know is what makes Lisa tick. So like the connections to her heart, and to understand what motivates you. And I need to understand that holistic perspective. So it's kind of like, it's not one or the other, right? But I think with personas, it helps us give that 360 view that we're after, and to really understand the need states, like I said, of our guests. Okay, so it was the missing piece, I guess, in terms of bringing all of that information together to be able to give you a rich picture. Yeah. So when you were thinking about creating personas, so for you, what was success going to look like? Getting it done, firstly. I think that's very important. But I think when you work, obviously, part of an organisation, and a large organisation at that, you've got stakeholder management. So, you know, it's easy for me to talk about kind of research jargon and lingo, but I've got to remember that my stakeholders, some of them don't even kind of dig into research on a daily basis. Okay. They might be aware of it, but everyone's backgrounds are different, right? Yeah. So I think success is having the understanding for those that aren't market research professionals or in customer experience. And to be able to kind of convey that difference between segmentation and personas, right, and how each of them play. Right. And then to be able to implement it into their work. I think for sure that was our key objective. Okay, so starting out then, when you're thinking about, you know, what success was going to be looking like for you guys, it was making sure that essentially you turned the findings into insight, right? Yeah. So something that someone who wasn't a market research professional could use. Yeah. So to create something that was a common language, and a usable tool that not only helped them understand customers, but took action as well. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, and that's why, so obviously in terms of, it's not just, here you go and working with Engine, it was like, here's your personas. It was actually a collaboration, and which goes from the discovery stage, as we say, like basically the brainstorming, coming together, understanding what our objectives are, what do you want to achieve from this project, but also giving Engine actual understanding of the foundation we have already.
Right.
So, you know, we think this is the reason customers go to cinema. This is the reason they go to leisure. This is the reason they go to indoor skiing. But again, they're kind of our understanding, and it's the right understanding, but we need to validate that, because we're giving you guys our sources. But I think that bit in the middle before the personas are created, which is us getting together, having those sessions, and then using those sessions to then go on to the qualitative work that you guys did for us, is just something that kind of is very important. But then getting the right people in the room.
Okay.
So I can't expect my stakeholders to just go, here you go, here's lovely 7 personas, get on with it.
Yeah.
But because they've been part of that discovery stage,
Yeah.
they've been in the room, we've asked their opinion, they've helped create even the names. You know, it might sound small, but it's actually making them kind of understand the actual kind of benefits of the personas. But by them being part of the creative process, it kind of is then it's just going in.
Okay.
You know, so it helps them kind of understand.
Okay. So you set out with some really clear objectives about what a good persona was going to look like for you.
Yeah.
Right. But if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying as part of that, one of the real success factors for it for you was the process that you went through in terms of designing them to bring everyone with you on that journey.
Yeah.
So why don't we start then in terms of the process that you went through as a team?
Yeah.
So right up front, you went into a discovery phase. So just for people listening to the podcast, can you just bring that to life and just talk a little bit about what that entailed and why that was important?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, that point of it allowed us to kind of firstly understand, so what is it that we do know, right? So we looked at our existing data, and there's large amounts of like primary research, like I said, loads of quantitative surveys. You know, it was kind of just off the back of COVID ending. So we had a COVID tracker. Mm-hmm. We have done past qualitative work as well. And then our segmentation analysis. So I think from us, the discovery stage actually started from within our organisation, which is, okay, so what do we have? And then to work with your team and to say, look, this is what we have. And then we work together to understand, well, what are the gaps? Because it could be that in doing that, we understand actually doing focus groups was not enough. Yeah. Right? So we had to really assess kind of what was missing. And then I think we had to, again, really understand the objectives of what is it that we want to achieve. Because I think it's one thing to just say we want to create personas. But I think, again, having that in mind that, look, this is going to feed into marketing strategy. This is going to be used for our human resources. This is going to be fed into training. This is going to help create campaigns. So I think that was important in the discovery stage also to kind of have that off the back. And then I think, again, like having the right people, forming that squad. I remember, I think in the beginning, I was like, oh, I need so-and-so there. And you could easily get kind of 50 people. And you guys kind of had to reel me in for that and say, look, you know, actually it's a squad. I get it. You have 3 brands that you guys look after, large brands, and they have their own brand owners. But to make it most effective, even the squad size is something that you need to think about, right? Because like we know, having 50 voices in a room is not going to help anyone, right? Especially if it's a creative process. So I think that, and it really is that discovery process. I think it says it as it is on the tin, right? And then that kind of set us up. And even like having advanced analytics, I mean, it's such a valuable tool, and we work very closely with our team. But it's something that, in terms of, it's not doing focus groups, it's not something that they're really used to. Right? For them, they're very data heavy. And what they perceive more of like the softer touch. But I could see that they're always after that kind of why do people behave this? We know they come to our assets, but why? And I think having them in the discovery stage also allowed that process to kind of organically form as well.
Okay, so at that point, you're crystallising your outcomes. Yeah. You're working through what you know already. You had some hypotheses as well, right? That you wanted to test through the research and understand. But also there's a big element of the stakeholders, so the people who are going to end up using these as a tool, making sure that, you know, what they want to know and find out is taken account of right up front. Yeah. So it's very much, that first bit was very much about scene setting and creating the right conditions for success.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we move past that stage and then we go into the research. Yeah. Right. So bring that piece to life for our listeners in terms of the research, the extent of that and the impact of that. Yeah.
Actually, I would also add, we also conducted stakeholder interviews. Yeah. So not only were they part of the process, but they actually had a one-to-one session with your team. Yeah. To kind of understand it better. And again, it might be something that they might not want to share in a room, but on a one-to-one setting, I think that kind of then helps them also convey where they feel the business is going and what they want to achieve and where they feel the pain points are and how we could improve as well as a business. So I think that was something that was important. But yeah, and so I think before we actually went on to creating the focus groups, it was key and vital for us that we spoke to the right people. Yeah. So it wasn't just, you know, here's 50 and that's it. But, and as much as you can with qualitative, I mean, you know, you can't kind of get it down to the T in terms of the sample design. It's not quantitative research, we realise that. Mm-hmm. But, you know, you can design it to match kind of the customer profile. So dealing with two markets in UAE and KSA. Now, I think, you know, on the surface, it might seem like, well, they're quite similar markets. But actually their breakdown of the population is very different. So in UAE, there's 60 to 70% are South Asians. So it's a large expat population. And then in KSA, it's the opposite. It's 70% locals. So, you know, what we didn't want is for both of us to come up with like, here's 25 interviews and they're in KSA based on only expat population, because that's not going to help anyone, especially since we went through, you know, we need to work with these personas. They're going to make business decisions, help us make business decisions. So I think that helping form, like, who do we need to speak to was very important. And then I think making sure that not only the core team, but a brand owner was present during the interviews as well. So, you know, whether that was, as a silent listener, I mean, your team did a brilliant job in executing the actual interviews. But it's just, again, that kind of bringing in our stakeholders, bringing in those that are important to go. And some of them have never been part of that. And, you know, it felt a bit like, oh, I feel a bit naughty kind of listening into a conversation that I don't think I should be there. And it's nice to watch because I think as, you know, professionals in market research, we kind of like take it for granted and think that's just a normal interview that's going on. If you're not part of it, you actually go, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And some of the comments that are made about what cinema means to them or what leisure and entertainment means to them. So yeah, I think that was kind of like the main takeaway from the research, and then obviously doing the actual analysis of it as well. So you know, when the interviews were done, it wasn't like that's it, now our work is kind of completed there from both sides. You know, it was like getting together and having interim understanding of this is what's coming through. Again, matching it back to, does that validate what you're looking for? Are there any nuggets that are actually new? Because, you know, that's the whole point of it. It also is to validate, but also to provide something that we actually haven't discovered.
So the whole research piece there, think about the sample size, think about making sure that you've got a good spread of customers, across all of your demographics, to make sure that you've got good representation across it. I'm also hearing you saying what was important about that research piece was actually being able to hear firsthand from customers some of the quotes and being able to understand what sits behind what they're saying and why they're saying that.
Absolutely.
Because it gives some more flavour to some of your key stakeholders. And then as you came out of the research, then there's the whole piece of analyse what we found. So what's validating what we know, what's really different. And then taking those two pieces then and saying, okay, so how now then do we start to group those things together to start to form some of our personas? So, what separates out these customers? What's the difference? What's the point of difference? And what's the points of similarities?
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we go into that next phase then, and we're talking about the phase where we start to really design those personas. As you're going through that phase, what were some of your key takeaways from that part of the process?
From the analysis stage and bringing it all together.
Right, through to the creation of the personas.
Again, I think each stage brought its own kind of discoveries, right? Because even with the analysis then, before we even formed the personas, it was getting that group together, our squad, and then working on tools that you guys use, like the Miro board. So I think, again, it's like having the right people help form the analysis. And like you said, I think to gain the kind of understand the commonalities, like we said, dealing with two markets. So, is going to the cinema the same kind of, does it feed the same need for someone who's a guest in UAE versus that who's a guest in KSA? So I think it's kind of the analysis stage. Again, it was for us, each stage had its own learnings.
So was there anything in that analysis stage, was there anything that stood out to you that you learned that you hadn't learned before?
I think there was actually quite a bit validation, but I think in terms of new stuff, in particular, like we had a hypothesis about KSA, and we've got to remember, like, as established as the cinema scene is now in KSA, actually cinema reopened in 2018, right? So that's after 35 years of cinemas just not being open in the country. So it's relatively new. So I think it's kind of understanding, like, it would be wrong to assume that the same guest needs are, in KSA is the same as the one in UAE. And I think then understanding that actually the price point consideration, like it's perceived that cinema's actually priced higher. And it is in terms of versus UAE, the price of the ticket in KSA. And so as a result, because Saudi borders onto Bahrain, what we discovered is that some guests would actually travel. So it sounds like they're going to another country, but they're driving for 30 minutes, crossing the border to Bahrain and watching a movie there because it's cheaper. So for us, that's obviously an insight. Now, it doesn't mean that, the knee-jerk reaction is, okay, we need to drop our pricing, because obviously we need to be competitive and reflective of the market. But it allows us to understand that the relationship with cinema, but also that, it's so kind of powerful that someone would get in a car and cross over So again, you know, it's not just that relationship, but also value for money comes up then. So it allows us to understand like kind of what works, what's needed.
So having got some of those insights, and then we went to start to create the personas. So as we went through that process, you brought in, you know, varying stakeholders into those workshops to help create those personas.
Yeah.
And I think that was quite a new approach for you guys. What did your stakeholders think of that? What value did they get from that?
Yeah.
What difference did that make?
Yeah. Made a huge difference. I think, again, it's, you know, you can't expect to kind of get buy-in or convince someone of what you're trying to do in any project if all you're doing is getting them at the end stage. And I think having them throughout kind of the discovery stage through to the analysis and then also the debrief, you know, the value that they saw was also they to them, they helped form it as well. So it was actually a collective, right? Okay. And then I think that then naturally leads on to ownership.
Right.
Because then you don't just feel like, you know, here's Lisa, she's just telling me these are the 7 personas and that's it, kind of follow it. But actually, no, we've done this together.
Right.
So it's achieving something together.
Okay.
So I think the value of that is just tenfolds that you can't put an estimate on.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So the collaboration was a really critical part for you. And I guess that links back to one of the objectives that you had right from the start, you know, in terms of making them actionable.
Yeah.
So making sure that the people that you had involved were part of creating the final output so that they could use it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you end up with a set of personas.
Yeah.
And you then start to share those within with your stakeholders and within the business. So just bring to life, Yasmin, what you ended up with.
Yeah.
And what was different about what you ended up with versus what you had previously.
Yeah.
And therefore the impact that had.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really interesting question. I think what we had, again, I think as we mentioned, that whole changing in consumer behaviour because of COVID, and I don't want to keep talking about it, but I think it's something so powerful and relevant that you can't just ignore it. So I think the personas we had were pre that, right? So if we are convincing, new ways of marketing to our guests, new strategies, that can't be on something that's now no longer relevant. The new personas allowed us to take that into account, that change that came through, that new leisure time, appreciation for it as well.
Share a bit, Yasmin, about the impact that the final deliverables, in terms of a new set of personas had within your business.
Yeah. So in terms of the impact of it, it's something that it's not just like one measure of time. What I mean by that, it's like the impact is still current, right? Because it's delivering them, introducing the 7 personas. So these are our 7 kind of new people to introduce to help our stakeholders understand what that now means, and in particular to their remit. We work in marketing, and to kind of make sure that they're always present. So when we're planning now for 2024, we've used our personas in that. So we know this is our target audience. So it's just say if we're going after families, if we're going after those that are movie fanatics, if we're going after those that are into luxury, for us to be able to do that, we need to, again, understand what's their kind of makers and breakers, right? as we say, and by having the personas in the room when these discussions are happening helps kind of formulate that, and also helps validate and justify why we're making these plans for 2024.
Great. And does it help with making quicker decisions?
I don't know if it's quicker, but I think it's definitely making kind of minimizing the risks, I would say. So I wouldn't say safer, because then that sounds a bit bland. Yeah. But I think it's kind of giving that reassurance that, look, this is based on, a kind of a process, and it's also based on speaking to actual customers. So again, I think it allows decisions to be made, but based on something. Okay. Not necessarily quicker.
Okay. So there's some real, so it's evidence-based decisions, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly.
Okay. And so having now, reflect, so your personas are in place, you've done a big communication campaign out to all those people who need to know and use the personas. Yeah. So you're using them in marketing. Yeah. Where else?
In our planning, in business strategy. Yeah. In our training. Okay. So with human resources or human capital, as they say in this part of the world. Yeah. Also for our own knowledge. So in, like I said, I'm part of a customer experience team. Okay. So it's not just these are personas, but actually now we need to create their own journey map for them. Okay. So each persona would have their own pain points. So we go through those touch points to understand actually, is it pre-journey or pre-arrival where the crux of the issue is for this persona, or where we need to focus, or is it mid-journey, or is it post-journey? Okay.
So you're able to really target the particular parts of the customer journey, understand, what they need at those parts, and redesign services and experiences to really meet and exceed their needs. Yeah. Right. So really able to hone in and create some real focused activity in terms of making some real meaningful change.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And they've stayed as a tool, so they've been, I think you've had them now for nearly
a year.
A year?
Yeah. Also, yeah. Yeah.
So they're in place, you've used them and you continue to use them, which is great. So for anyone who's thinking about creating a set of personas for themselves, having been through that process, start to end, what tips would you give?
Yeah. I think firstly, you're in safe hands if you use Engine, for sure. But I think, again, the tip I would say is that don't just see it as something that you give to the agency and you don't need to be part of it. Right. I think what you put in is what you get out. Right? Sounds basic, but that is it. Yeah. And I think that collaboration is something that's very key. Again, getting your stakeholders in the room at the right time. And just letting it kind of not being too kind of pressurized or directing it too much as well. I think that whole organic growth is important as well. Okay. So kind of going with the tide in a way. Yeah. But I think that gets you the best results at the end.
Okay. So that's an interesting point, right? Because it is it's a creative process.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So you don't know what you get until the end.
Yes.
So I guess there's an element there of trust the process.
Yes, I agree. And I think I remember there's times where you do think, oh gosh, like what's happening here, or what does this mean, or what's it going to look like? When does this end? But I think those questions are important. Right. And then, I think when you get to that stage, you're in the right process, in the right stage, and in the right hands.
Okay, great. And if you were to have done anything differently, what would you have done differently?
That's a tough one. I don't know if something stands out about doing things differently. I think we really did push ourselves to make sure we're as collaborative and involved in the process as possible. Yeah. We made sure we were really transparent. Mm-hmm. if that's with you guys and also with our stakeholders. So I don't know if I would do anything differently, to be honest.
Okay, great. Well, Yasmin, thank you ever so much for your time. It's been a great pleasure to see you and for you to share your wisdom with our listeners. So thank you.
No problem. Thank you so much.
So if you'd like to understand how customer-centric your organisation really is, in the episode description, you'll find a link to our customer centricity assessment. Stay tuned for our next episode. And remember to follow us on our YouTube, Spotify and Apple podcasts.